Okay, so this is day one of quad. And what makes something quadratic? That is not quadratic. What makes something quadratic is when the variable gets squared or to the third or to the fourth. And so it's really not that much different. This is still the slope. It's kind of different because the picture of it is a parabola. Do you remember graphing these things and seeing a curved shape? I think most of you have seen a quadratic at some point. Instead of getting a straight line that would look like this, quadratics give you a curve that would look like, for instance, this one is a steeper parabola that's been moved up 4, so it kind of looks like that, kind of like a U shape. So they make curved lines. All right, so that's the main difference now with a quadratic. So if you're going to have powers, then you have to learn how to handle powers. And one of the things about this is when you have a power that gets put to a power, like that. Well, this just means x squared is being put to the third, which means x squared, and x squared. Now, this is important. They are not being added. They're being multiplied. So that means, can you tell from this? You could put it all together and say x to the a 2 and a 2 and a 2. I know what somebody's saying 8, and that actually would make a lot of sense because you're multiplying. But multiplying 2 times 2 times 2 would give you 8. But you don't multiply this kind. This kind you add. This kind you multiply. So the answer to this is x to the 6th. When they're written like this, you add them, and it would be 2, 4, 6, x to the 6th. When it's written like this, you multiply them. So that's the key. Okay, this is important that you be paying attention right now. Looking this way. All right. So if I have x to the 4th to the 3rd, that does mean the same thing as x to the, what did I just say a second ago? I know it's easy to forget. Is that the kind where you multiply, or is that kind where you add?
Add, right?
This kind, you multiply and you get 12. But if you wrote it out, it would be like this. Let me just show you why it's kind of add at the same time. Do you get, wait a minute, too many of them. There we go. Do you get that this means the same thing as this? That's what to the 3rd means. It means 3 of them all multiplied. This kind, you would add, and you get 4 plus 4 plus 4, x to the 12th. This kind, you would multiply. That's the main thing you got to get straight. So if I say x to the 5th times x to the 3rd, that kind is x to the 8th. If I said x to the 5th to the 3rd, that kind, you multiply. So if you can get that straight, it's either adding or multiplying the powers. Then you got it. Not doing the graphing part today. I started with that just to show you a picture of what makes a quadratic different. This whole thing's called quad. And this is what we're starting with, is the powers. So again, a typical question goes like this. 5x squared squared. Well, 5 squared is pretty easy. 5 squared is 25, because it means 5 times 5. X squared squared, this is actually a pretty bad example because you could actually add them or multiply them, and either way it's 4. Like, you can't get that one wrong. It's 25x to the 4th. But do you know, was I supposed to add them or multiply them when they're like this? Multiply. All right. So here's another one where it's 6 times x to the 3rd times x to the 5th. And that 6 is not being put to a power. Do you see that? There's no power on the 6. So the answer is just 6. And then do I add those powers or do I multiply those powers? Add them. There you go. All right, I'm going to give you one to see if you caught what I've been laying down. 5x to the 9th, x to the 3rd. Don't say it. Write down what you think the answer is. And then I'll ask you to compare with the kid next to you, and you will see who's got it right. 5x to the 9th, x to the 3rd. Is this the kind where you would add them or multiply them? I'll pause for a second. All right, he says 5 x to the 12th. It looks like you added them and you did it right. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Okay, good. Now let me show you how it could be different if it was in a parenthesis. Now that 5 is getting hit. It's getting hit with a power. And the x to the 3rd is also getting put to the power of 2. And it's different than last time. So you got to ask yourself, is this the kind you'd add? Is this the kind you'd multiply? Write down what you think the answer is. Compare with the kid next to you. He doesn't have anybody next to him. So, AL, would you compare with him? See if you got the same answer. Casey, could you compare across with us? I'm still recording, so I don't want to say full names. All right. Did you write this one down yet? Write that one down and try it. I don't think so. Okay. This 5, is it being put to a power? Yeah, because the parenthesis here means everything in there is getting squared. Did you say 25 as part of your answer? Raise your hand if you had that right. That was what you were supposed to do. Next, those two are x to the something. And the question is, do you add them or multiply them? And you multiply them, and it's 25x to the 6th. Okay. All right. Then the last thing they do is they give you ones that are kind of a mix, where there's some that are being multiplied by others that are getting put to a power. And you wouldn't know what 3 to the 5th is. So how about if I do 3 to the 3rd? I bet you can do 3 times 3 times 3 in your head. Don't say it out loud, but and then this is going to make it too hard. So erase the 5. Just do that part, and when it's done, we'll times by 5. So just erase the 5 for now. Try that one, because the numbers get too big. All of a sudden, I can't even do it in my head. Okay, what'd you get for 3 to the 3rd? Because that's the first thing. That has to get its power done. 27 is correct. And then it's an x to the something. 27x to the, you either add them or multiply them, like this. Multiply them. 6th. That's all right. All right, so that's powers of powers. Let me talk to you about what that means, power of a power. Do you get that right there is a power on the x? And now this is a power that's on the power. So that is called powers of powers. I'll say it again. Let's say I had x to the 3rd to the 8th. That's the 3rd power of x, and that's the 8th power of that. And in that kind, you multiply. X to the 24. If it had been this, what would you have had instead? It would be x to the what? Yep. This kind you add, this kind you multiply. All right. So I'm going to hand out the worksheet, and I'll pause the video for a second while we get the worksheet handed out. Yes, sir. Question? Okay, so I think what you're asking is, what's the final? Yeah, you do the 8 times 3 and you get 24. And then this, if I had a number in here, yeah, you'd put it to the 24th power. It'd be a massive answer. Let's say I only put in like 3. Well, 3 to the 24th means 3 times 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 24 times. You know what I'm saying? But your answer, you just leave x to the 24th unless they tell you what x is. And if we ever ask you to put something to the 24th, it better be something easy like 1. You get 1 to the 24th would actually be pretty easy to do. All right. So I'm going to pause for a second while I hand out this worksheet. Okay, so here's our first one on the worksheet. This worksheet is called Power to a Power, Exponent Rules. And do you think we should add them or multiply them?
I think we should
Multiply them is correct. That is 3 then to the 5 times 8, 40 is correct. If you think I actually want you to do 3 to the 40th, you're insane, because that's a monstrous number. It would seriously go across the whole page. Because you do 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, and you do that 40 times, it gets to be such a big number, your calculator can't even hold it all. Okay, so we're going to leave it as 3 to the 40th. That's it. Moving on. Letter B. Would you read me B, Miss SF? Y to the third to the 10th. Okay. And this is not rocket science. You either add them or you multiply them. Which kind is this? Multiply them. So what do you get? Y to the 30th. That's it. All right. When do we get to the kind where you actually add them? Let's go to F as in Frank. Everybody look at F as in Frankenstein. X squared times y squared squared. Well, in the order of operations, the rules for what order you got to do stuff. Parentheses are always first. So you go inside and you say, can I do anything in there? I can't do anything to the y squared. So then the next thing is exponents. Do you see how we have an exponent here that's on the other exponent? And that's the kind we just practiced. That becomes y to the what? Y to the fourth. Now we have x squared times y to the fourth. Do you get how some kids think you should then add these powers and think it's to the sixth? Why can't you? What's different? They're different what's? Yeah, there's an x and a y. They're different variables. You have to leave this alone. Those are called not like terms. You can't add x's and y's. I can't take oranges and apples and say I got orange apples. It doesn't make any sense. You can't say I got 6 oranges and 5 apples, so I got 11 orange apples. That makes no sense at all. There's different. I got to say I got 6 of these and 5 of those. Here, I got to say I got 2 x's, like x times x, and I got 4 y's. If you wanted to write it out like that, that'd be kind of dumb, though, because it's cleaner to just leave it like this. They can't go together. They are not like terms. All right, so we're done with F as in Frankenstein. All right, so I've told you which ones to skip. Skipping H and O and S and T. The rest of the worksheet is due tomorrow. If you don't turn it in, it's a 0. That hurts your grade a lot. You would actually be starting off day 1 with an F. That would be sad. So get it done. We are going to put the grades into the homework really often. I'm not going to promise every day, but really often. Okay, so get these puppies done. That's all I got for you for your homework for today.